One Saturday, I was cleaning the attic of our house. Mark, my husband, was working in his office downstairs. I had been putting it off for weeks, but now I needed to do it. The attic was full of old boxes, some of which we hadn't touched since we moved in. I moved one box to the side, and then I saw something strange. There was a small wooden box in the corner, hidden behind some old blankets. I was curious. I opened the box carefully, and inside, I found a collection of old letters. They were yellow with age, and the paper smelled dusty. I took the letters out and looked at them closely. They were written in a neat, beautiful handwriting. The name on the letters was Rachel, and the address on the envelope said it was from a place far away. I sat down on the floor, holding the letters in my hands. I felt strange. I had never seen these letters before. I didn't know what to do. I looked at them for a long time before finally deciding to open one. It felt wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I slowly unfolded the first letter. As I read the letter, my heart began to race. The words were full of love. Mark had written about Rachel in such a deep, emotional way. He told her how much he loved her, how he missed her, and how he couldn't wait to see her again. He wrote about their time together, and it seemed like their love was something special. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I had never heard Mark talk about me in that way. I continued reading more of the letters. With each one, I felt worse. The letters were filled with beautiful words and promises. Mark spoke of a love that was strong and real. I felt like I was reading someone else's life. I knew that Rachel was Mark's ex-girlfriend, but I never imagined that he had loved her so much. I didn't know if I was angry, sad, or confused. My mind was spinning. As I read more, I started to wonder if Mark still had feelings for Rachel. Why didn't he ever mention these letters? Why didn't he tell me about her? I had been married to Mark for 5 years, and I had never seen anything like this before. Mark and I had a good relationship, but these letters made me question everything. Was I just a replacement for Rachel? Was I not the one Mark truly loved? I closed the box quickly and hid it in the corner again. My hands were shaking. I felt as though I had discovered something I wasn't supposed to know. I tried to forget about the letters, but I couldn't. They were always in my mind. I spent the rest of the day trying to act normal, but I felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. I wondered how Mark would act if I asked him about them. What would I say? What if he didn't care that I knew? The next few days were strange. Every time I looked at Mark, I remembered what I had read. His smile, his touch, everything felt different now. I couldn't look at him the same way. I kept asking myself if he still loved Rachel, or if he ever stopped. I wanted to talk to him about it, but I didn't know how to begin. How could I tell him I had found his old love letters? How could I ask him about Rachel without sounding jealous or insecure? I started noticing small things about Mark that made me feel uneasy. When we were having dinner, he smiled when he mentioned something about his past, and I wondered if it was about Rachel. When we watched old movies together, he would sometimes look at me and then quickly look away. It made me think that maybe I was just a part of his life, but not the most important part. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I needed to know the truth. I couldn't live with this doubt in my mind. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I asked Mark if he had ever kept anything from his past. He looked at me confused, but I couldn't explain myself. I was afraid to tell him I had found the letters, but he didn't press me. I felt the distance between us growing, like something was wrong, but neither of us was talking about it. The next day, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to confront him. I picked up the box from the attic and brought it downstairs. I placed it on the kitchen table where we usually sat. Mark was sitting on the couch, reading a book. He didn't see the box. My heart was beating fast. I felt so nervous and scared. What if he was angry? What if he denied it? I took a deep breath and walked over to him. I placed the box in front of him. His eyes widened when he saw it. He didn't say anything at first. I waited. I had so many questions. I wanted to know why he kept the letters and why he never told me about them. I wanted to understand what they meant. Did they mean something that was still important to him? Finally, he spoke. He said that the letters were from a time in his life when he was young and in love with Rachel. He explained that they were just memories and that they didn't mean anything now. He told me that Rachel was part of his past and that he loved me, not her. But I wasn't sure. His words didn't feel like the truth. I wanted to believe him, but I felt betrayed. The love in those letters was too strong, too real to be forgotten so easily. I wondered if Mark really had let go of Rachel, or if he was just saying what I wanted to hear. I needed to know more. I couldn't just let it go. I had to find out if Mark still loved Rachel. The pain in my chest grew. The trust one had in him was starting to fade away. I needed answers, and I knew I wasn't going to stop until I had them. The next few days were hard. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters and what Mark had said. He told me that Rachel was a part of his past, but I wasn't sure if I could believe him. The love he had written about in those letters felt so real, so deep. I began to doubt everything. Was I really the one he loved, or was I just someone he settled for after Rachel left? I tried to act normal. I didn't want to show Mark how much I was hurting. We went about our usual routine: dinner, watching TV, and talking about small things like work and the weather. But everything felt different. Every time Mark smiled or laughed, I wondered if he was thinking about Rachel. Every time he mentioned something from his past, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. It was like I was living in a world where the past was always present, and I couldn't escape it. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided that I needed to ask Mark more questions. I needed to know what he really felt about Rachel. I needed him to be honest with me. I didn't want to live with this doubt in my heart any longer. I felt like I was slowly losing him, and I wasn't sure what to do about it. I waited until we were alone in the kitchen. Mark was making dinner, chopping vegetables, and I stood by the counter, watching him. The silence between us felt heavy. I wanted to ask him so many things, but I didn't know where to start. How could I make him understand how much this was hurting me? How could I make him see that I needed more than just empty words? I took a deep breath and spoke. I asked him again about Rachel. I told him that I needed to know the truth. I needed him to be honest with me, to tell me if he still had feelings for her. I told him that the letters had made me feel like I was never enough for him, like I was just someone he had settled for after losing Rachel. Mark looked at me, his face filled with confusion and worry. He said that I was being too hard on him, that those letters were from a time when he was young and confused. He said that Rachel was part of his past and that he loved me, not her. But the words felt empty. I didn't feel better after hearing them. They didn't take away the pain I was feeling inside. I told him that I didn't know if I could believe him. The more he spoke, the more I felt unsure. I didn't know if he was telling the truth or just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. The pain in my heart was growing, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to trust him, but the doubt was too strong. The thought that Mark might still love Rachel made my stomach twist with fear. Mark became defensive. He told me that I was overthinking things, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I couldn't stop thinking about those letters. I couldn't stop thinking about how much love they contained and how Mark had never shared any of that love with me. He had never written me such beautiful words. I didn't understand why. Was I not as special as Rachel? Was I not enough for him? As the days went by, the tension between us only grew. Every time I looked at Mark, I saw the man who had written those letters, the man who had loved someone else so deeply. I wondered if I would ever be able to trust him again. I wondered if I would ever feel like I was the one he truly loved. I couldn't live with this doubt for much longer. I decided to find out more. I needed answers. I needed to know if Mark's feelings for Rachel were still there, if he still thought about her, if he still wanted her. I didn't know what I would do with the truth, but I had to know. I started looking through our old photos. I looked at pictures of Mark and me, pictures from our trips, our celebrations, and our quiet moments together. I tried to find something that would prove that he loved me the way he had loved Rachel. But I couldn't find anything that felt the same. There were no letters, no deep words, no promises like the ones he had written to Rachel. It made me feel like I was always second best. Then I remembered something. There was a box in the closet, a box full of old things. I had never opened it, but I knew it was full of things from Mark's past, old gifts, photos, and other memories. Maybe I would find something there that could help me understand. Maybe there was something that would prove he loved me as much as he had loved Rachel. The next morning, I went to the closet and opened the box. It was filled with old things, letters, photos, and small mementos from his past. I sifted through them, trying to find something that would help me understand. I found a photo of Mark and Rachel together. They were both smiling, sitting on the beach, looking happy. They looked like they were in love. I stared at the photo for a long time. It hurt to see it. It hurt to see them so happy together, knowing that I was not the one in the picture. I wanted to throw the photo away, but I couldn't. I felt like I needed to keep it, like it was the key to understanding everything. But the more I looked at the photo, the more I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between me and Mark. The next day, Mark noticed that the photo was missing. He asked me where it was, but I didn't answer. I couldn't look him in the eye. I was too afraid to know the truth, but I couldn't stop myself from searching for it. I knew that I couldn't keep living in the dark. I needed to know if I was really the one he loved, or if I was just a shadow of his love for Rachel. I felt lost. My mind was full of questions, and my heart was full of fear. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. The truth was out there, and I was going to find it no matter what. The days after I found the photo were difficult. Mark noticed that I was acting distant. I couldn't look at him the same way. Every time he smiled or held my hand, I felt like I was lying to myself. I was pretending everything was fine, but inside, I was struggling. I had so many questions, and I couldn't stop wondering if he still loved Rachel. I wanted to believe him when he said I was the one he loved, but the doubt was eating at me. Mark tried to act normal. He made small talk, asking about my day or what I wanted for dinner, but I didn't feel the same connection. I couldn't stop thinking about the letters and the photo of him with Rachel. I wanted to ask him more questions, to dig deeper, but I was scared. I was scared of what I might find out, and I was scared of what would happen if I didn't like the answers. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, stuck between trust and doubt. I needed to find out what was really going on in Mark's heart. If he still had feelings for Rachel, I needed to know. I couldn't continue to live in a relationship where I wasn't sure if I was the one he loved. That weekend, I decided to do something I had never done before. I would go to the place where Mark and Rachel had spent so much time together, the place in the photo. It was a beach they had visited often, and I knew that it held many memories for Mark. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I thought that maybe, just maybe, seeing the place where they had been so happy would help me understand. It might even help me find the truth. I packed a small bag, took my car keys, and drove to the beach. As I drove, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about the letters, the photo, and the words Mark had said to me. He said he loved me, but did he really? If he did, why did he still hold on to these memories of Rachel? Why did he keep those letters hidden in the attic, where I would never have found them if I hadn't been cleaning? When I arrived at the beach, it was quiet. The waves were gently crashing against the shore, and the air smelled salty and fresh. I walked along the beach, my heart heavy with questions. I didn't know why I was here or what I was hoping to find, but I needed to be in this place. I needed to feel connected to the past that Mark had shared with Rachel. Maybe it would give me some answers. I found a spot on the sand and sat down. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden light across the water. It was peaceful, but inside, I felt like I was falling apart. I closed my eyes and tried to calm my mind, but all I could think about was Mark and Rachel, the love they had shared, the memories they had made together. It all seemed so real. I wondered if it was possible for Mark to love both of us, Rachel and me, or if I was just a replacement for the love he had lost. I sat there for what felt like hours, just thinking. The more I thought, the more confused I became. I realized that I didn't know what I wanted. Part of me wanted to find out that Mark had truly moved on from Rachel, that I was the one he loved, and that all those letters and memories meant nothing now. But another part of me was scared. What if I found out that Mark still loved Rachel? What if I wasn't the one for him? I didn't think I could handle that. As the sun finally set and the sky turned dark, I stood up and made my way back to the car. I didn't find any answers, but I knew I couldn't keep running from the truth. I had to face whatever was waiting for me at home, even if I wasn't ready. I still wasn't sure if I was strong enough to handle it. When I returned home, Mark was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. He didn't ask where I had been. I could tell he knew something was wrong, but he didn't say anything. I could feel the tension between us, the weight of the secrets and the unspoken words. I sat down beside him, but I couldn't look him in the eye. I felt like a stranger in my own home, like the person I had been just a few days ago was gone. I was afraid that asking him more questions would make everything worse, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know the truth. I needed to hear him say it. I looked at him and said, "Mark, do you still think about Rachel? Do you still love her?" His face froze. I could see the surprise in his eyes, but also something else, guilt, maybe, or sadness. He didn't say anything at first, and I could feel my heart beating faster. I waited, hoping he would tell me the truth, hoping he would say something that would make everything feel better. But instead, he just looked at me, unsure of what to say. I felt tears start to fill my eyes. I didn't want to cry, but I couldn't stop it. I didn't know if I was ready to hear what Mark had to say, but I knew I couldn't keep living with this pain. I needed to know if he still loved Rachel, and if he did, I needed to know what that meant for us. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. Mark finally spoke. He said that Rachel was part of his past, but that it didn't mean anything now. He said that I was the one he loved, and he hoped that I could trust him. But I wasn't sure if I could. His words felt empty, like he was trying to convince me of something that wasn't true. I didn't know if I should believe him or if I should walk away. I needed more time to think. The answers I was looking for weren't clear yet, and the more I thought, the more confused I became. I knew that I couldn't make a decision right away, but I also knew that I couldn't keep living in the uncertainty. I needed to find out what was real, what was true, and what my future with Mark would look like. I just didn't know how to find those answers yet. The days after Mark's words felt like a blur. He said that he loved me, that Rachel was a part of his past, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I wanted to believe him, but the doubt was still there. It felt like we were standing on two different sides of a wide gap, and I wasn't sure how to cross it. I didn't know if I could trust him completely. Every time I looked at him, I thought of Rachel, and every time I thought of Rachel, my heart sank. I spent the next few days thinking. I didn't want to make any decisions in the heat of the moment. I needed to clear my mind. I needed to figure out if I was being too emotional, too suspicious, or if there really was something wrong in our relationship. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. I loved Mark, but I wasn't sure if I could keep living with this feeling of uncertainty. I decided that I needed some space. I told Mark I would go for a walk. I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't want to ask any more questions. I just needed to be alone with my thoughts. The weather was beautiful, so I decided to go to the park. It was quiet there, and I thought that maybe the fresh air would help clear my mind. I sat on a bench in the park, watching people walk by. There were families, couples, and children playing. It was peaceful, but my mind was still racing. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark and Rachel. I couldn't stop wondering if I was just a second choice, if I was never going to be the one he truly loved. I thought back to the photo of Mark and Rachel at the beach. They looked so happy together. They were in love. I could see it in their eyes. It made me feel small, like I didn't matter as much as she did. I couldn't understand why Mark still held on to those memories. If he loved me, why? Did he keep that photo? Why didn't he get rid of it like he had gotten rid of so many other things from his past? I realized that I was scared. I was scared of losing Mark, but I was also scared of what would happen if I stayed. I couldn't keep living in this confusion. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurt. I had to decide what was more important, my love for Mark or my peace of mind. If he still loved Rachel, I didn't know if I could live with that. I walked around the park for a long time, trying to sort out my feelings. I thought about what it would be like to leave. Could I really walk away from Mark? Could I really let go of everything we had built together? But then I thought about the love he had for Rachel, and I wondered if that was something I could never replace. I didn't know if I could live in his shadow forever. As I walked, I noticed a couple sitting by the fountain. They were talking and laughing, clearly enjoying each other's company. It made me realize something important. Maybe Mark had loved Rachel deeply, but that didn't mean he couldn't love me too. Maybe I was so focused on their past that I wasn't seeing the present. Maybe Mark didn't want to lose me, even if he had once loved someone else. I felt a little better after thinking about it. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I needed to give Mark a chance. I needed to trust him, even if it was hard. It wasn't going to be easy, but if I wanted to keep our relationship, I had to move past the past. I couldn't keep comparing myself to Rachel. I was me, and I had my own place in Mark's life. I had to remember that. When I returned home, Mark was sitting on the couch, watching TV. He looked up when he saw me, and I could tell he had been waiting for me to come back. I didn't want to have another long conversation, but I knew we needed to talk. It was time to share my feelings with him. I sat down beside him and looked at him for a long time. He didn't say anything at first. He just waited. I could see the worry in his eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew that what I said next was important. I've been thinking a lot, I began. I've been feeling confused, but I think I understand something now. I paused for a moment, trying to find the right words. I know that you loved Rachel, but I also know that you love me too. I need to trust you. I need to believe that I'm enough for you and that we can move forward together. Mark looked at me with relief in his eyes. He didn't say anything, but I could see that he understood. He reached out and took my hand. For the first time in days, I felt like we were in the same place. Maybe it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I was ready to move forward, even if I still had doubts. I knew that love was something that took time, and I was willing to give it that time. The next few days were calmer. Mark and I spent more time together, doing things we enjoyed. We went for walks, watched movies, and had quiet dinners at home. I was trying to focus on the present and not let my worries about the past take over. Mark didn't mention Rachel, and I didn't bring her up either. It felt like we were both trying to rebuild the trust that had been broken. But deep inside, I knew that the journey wasn't over. There were still moments when I felt insecure, when I wondered if Mark's feelings for me were as strong as they had been for Rachel. I didn't know if I would ever feel completely sure, but I also knew that relationships took work. I had to keep trying, and I had to keep trusting. One evening, I was going through some old things in the closet when I found another letter. It wasn't one of Mark's, but it was from Rachel. It was a letter she had written to Mark before they broke up. I didn't want to read it, but I couldn't help myself. As I opened the letter, I felt a familiar knot form in my stomach. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I had to know what it said. I had to understand why this love from the past still seemed to haunt me. I held the letter in my hands, not sure what I would find inside, but knowing that it was another piece of the puzzle I had to solve. I stood there holding the letter, my heart beating fast. I had found it hidden deep in the back of the closet, tucked between old books and forgotten papers. It was yellowed with age, and the handwriting on the front was familiar. It was Rachel's handwriting. I didn't know why I was so nervous to open it, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know what it said. I needed to understand why this past relationship still felt so important to Mark. I took a deep breath and slowly opened the letter. As I read the words on the paper, my hands trembled. The letter wasn't long, but it was filled with emotion. Rachel had written about her love for Mark, how much he meant to her, and how hard it was to say goodbye. She said that even though they were ending their relationship, she would always care for him. The letter was full of sadness, but there was also a kind of hope in it, a hope that they would both find happiness, even if it wasn't together. I felt a wave of emotions hit me as I read the letter. Part of me understood why Mark had kept it. It was a piece of his past, a memory of someone he had loved deeply. But another part of me felt hurt. Why had he kept it so long? Why had he never told me about it? I didn't know if I was angry or sad or confused. I just felt overwhelmed. This letter was a part of Mark's history, but it was also something that seemed to be standing between us. It was a reminder of a love that wasn't mine. After reading the letter, I put it down carefully and sat on the floor. I felt like I had learned something important, but I wasn't sure if it made me feel better or worse. I understood now why Mark had been so careful about Rachel, why he had kept things from her. He had loved her, and it seemed like a love that had shaped him, but I was starting to feel like I would never be able to fully replace that. Maybe I didn't need to replace her, but the idea that I was always going to be second in his heart made me feel small. The next few days were hard. Mark didn't know that I had found the letter, but I could see the worry in his eyes. He seemed to be trying harder than usual to make everything feel normal. He asked me if I wanted to go out for dinner or if I wanted to watch a movie together, but I was still stuck in my own thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about Rachel and the letter. I couldn't stop wondering if I was really the one Mark loved, or if I was just someone who filled the space she had left behind. One evening, I decided I couldn't live with the doubt any longer. I had to know what Mark was feeling. I had to ask him directly. I didn't know if I was ready to hear the answer, but I knew that I couldn't go on pretending. I needed to know if there was still a place in his heart for Rachel, or if he was really ready to move on and be with me. I waited for Mark to come home from work. When he walked in the door, I could see that he was tired, but he still smiled when he saw me. His smile didn't reach his eyes, though. I could tell he was worried about me. I stood up and looked at him for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I found the letter," I said. It was the hardest thing I had ever said, but I needed to be honest. I needed to tell him what I had found. Mark's face went pale, and for a moment, he looked like he had been caught in a lie. He didn't say anything right away. I could see the weight of the situation on him. He had always been so careful about keeping his past from me, but now I had found something that he couldn't hide. "I didn't want you to find that," Mark said quietly. "It was a part of my past, but I thought I could move on from it." "I understand that it's a part of your past," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But why didn't you tell me about it? Why did you keep it hidden?" Mark sat down slowly, and I could see the guilt in his eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. Rachel was a big part of my life, and I thought that if you knew about her, it would make things between us harder." I felt a lump form in my throat. "It's already hard, Mark. I'm trying to understand, but it feels like you're still holding on to something that isn't mine. I don't know if I can keep living like this, always wondering if I'm just a replacement." Mark looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "I'm not holding on to Rachel, I swear. She's a part of my past, but you are my present. You're who I want to be with." I didn't know if I could believe him. I wanted to, but the words felt empty. I didn't know if I could trust him completely or if I would always feel like I was second place in his heart. But I also knew that I loved him and that I didn't want to give up on us just yet. "I don't know what to think anymore, Mark," I said, my voice trembling. "I love you, but I'm scared. I'm scared that no matter what I do, I'll never be the one you really want." Mark reached out and took my hand. "You are the one I want. I just need you to trust me. I need you to believe me when I say that I love you, not Rachel." I looked at him for a long time, trying to understand his words. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that our relationship was enough, that I was enough. But the doubt was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. I didn't know if I could ever fully get rid of it. "I'll try," I said finally. "I'll try to believe you." We sat in silence for a while, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that there would be more questions, more doubts, and more struggles. But I also knew that I wasn't ready to give up on Mark. I loved him too much. I just needed time to heal and to trust him again. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a chance for us. It wasn't perfect, and I still had a lot of questions, but maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. I was willing to try, and that was all I could give. As the days passed, I focused on taking one step at a time. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew that I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move forward, even if it meant facing my fears and doubts. I had to trust that, in time, I would learn to believe in us again. As the days went by, things began to feel more normal. Mark and I were learning how to live with the new reality. It wasn't perfect, and I still had doubts sometimes, but I was trying to trust him. We spent more time together, doing simple things like cooking dinner or going for walks. Slowly, I began to feel more secure in our relationship again. The weight that had been hanging over us was still there, but it was getting lighter. One day, I decided to take a big step. I wanted to see if I could let go of the past, not just Mark's past with Rachel, but my own fears and worries. I went into the living room where Mark was sitting, looking at his phone. I had been thinking a lot about how we could move forward, and I knew that I needed to let go of my doubts. I think I'm ready to let go of the past, I said. It wasn't easy to say, but I meant it. I was tired of feeling weighed down by the things that happened before. I wanted to focus on the future, on what we could build together. Mark looked up at me, his eyes filled with hope. He smiled, and I could see the relief in his face. He had been waiting for me to say this, to truly let go of my doubts. We both knew that moving forward meant not looking back. It meant trusting each other, no matter what had happened in the past. We spent the rest of the day together, enjoying each other's company. We didn't talk much about Rachel or the letter. It felt like we were starting fresh, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were in a good place. I had made peace with my doubts, and Mark had shown me that he truly wanted to be with me. The next week, Mark and I went to a family gathering. It was the first time I had met some of his relatives. At first, I felt nervous, not knowing how they would see me, especially after everything that had happened. But when we arrived, they greeted me with warmth and kindness. They made me feel like I belonged. Mark's family was different from what I had imagined, and it helped me see how much Mark valued his relationships. It wasn't just about his past with Rachel, but about the people in his life, including me. As the evening went on, I found myself laughing and enjoying the company of Mark's family. It was a small, quiet moment, but it meant a lot to me. I was starting to feel more comfortable in my own skin, and I knew that I was ready to move forward with Mark, even though there would still be challenges ahead. After the family gathering, we went home, and I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt before. Mark and I sat together in the living room, and I looked at him. "I think we're going to be okay," I said, the words coming easily now. Mark smiled and nodded. "I think so too." In that moment, I knew that we still had a long way to go, but I was no longer afraid of the future. I had learned that love wasn't perfect. It didn't mean there would be no mistakes or no past to deal with, but it meant that we were willing to face those challenges together. We were willing to trust each other, and that was enough. As the weeks went by, Mark and I continued to work on our relationship. There were still times when I felt insecure, when I thought about Rachel, but those moments were less frequent. I had learned to trust Mark, and more importantly, I had learned to trust myself. I had learned that I didn't need to compare myself to Rachel or anyone else. I was enough just as I was. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, I realized how far we had come. We had been through a lot, but we had made it through together. I leaned my head on Mark's shoulder and smiled. It wasn't a perfect love story, but it was our story, and I was ready to continue writing it one day at a time. I had learned that love was about more than just the good moments. It was about learning to trust, to forgive, and to move forward no matter what. It was about accepting the past, but not letting it define us. And with Mark by my side, I knew that we could face anything the future held. As the sun set outside, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. Our journey wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to create. And for the first time, I felt sure of the love that we had and the love that was still growing between us. I knew that there would always be challenges ahead, but I was no longer afraid of them. With Mark, I felt like we could face anything. And as we sat there together, I realized that sometimes the hardest things in life are the ones that lead to the greatest rewards.